You're listening to the Shipyard Cat Podcast, the unofficial SAFC podcast for fans everywhere.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the pod. Today we have a very special guest. This person has seen it all with Sunderland Football Club, the lows of back-to-back relegations and a 4-year torrid League One spell, and to the rise of us now getting back to where we rightly belong in the Premier League. This person is no other than Nick Barnes. How are you today, Nick?
All good, thank you. There's plenty in there to talk about.
Yeah, thought I would cover everything off with a big intro like that, and no other pod would be missing without a Robin. So Robin's joining us today. How are you today, bud?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Looking forward to this. It's a bit different from usual, so it's interesting to get another insight into the football club.
Indeed, it is. And as we mentioned on on one of the other pods, obviously Kev is busy enjoying himself, shall we say? Lucky for some. But we'll start off with the nitty gritty straight away. Obviously, this is for yourself there, Nick. You've been doing this a long time for Sunderland Football Club. You've obviously done radio and journalism as well. So it obviously all comprises in one. How did you actually get started into that role?
More by luck than judgment. When I was working at Radio Cumbria many years ago, I wasn't specifically working on sport when I was there, but then the sports editor left, and I was the only person on the station who had an interest in sport. So I took it on, and when I took it on, we were very heavily rugby league based. The main sports program was a Sunday afternoon for rugby league, and the football on a Saturday with Carlisle United was very much a sort of music mix with updates from Carlisle games. And I just thought we were missing a trick, even though Carlisle was struggling at the time. This was back in the early 90s. They were the sort of foot of the football league. There was still a big the support base for Carlisle is pretty big. It goes sort of to South Cumbria, West Cumbria, Southwest Scotland, encroaches into Northumberland to an extent, the borders. So their catchment area is very, very big. And when they're doing well, they can pull in 10, 12,000. So I thought that we really should be upping our coverage of the football. So I proposed to the station that if the football club were agreeable to let me travel on the team bus to keep costs down, and the station was agreeable, could we do full commentary of Carlisle home and away? Both the club and the radio station agreed, and that's how I started commentary at Carlisle United, and so went headlong into that and did 7 seasons at Carlisle, then did a summer with BBC Sport in London, but came back to do Newcastle United because I was about to be banned from Carlisle United by the then owner, Michael Knighton, and the Newcastle United job came up. I got that. Did that for 5 years before moving over to Sunderland in 2003. So the first season back in the then Division 1 with Mick McCarthy. So that's it in a nutshell.
And Brunton Park itself isn't exactly a small ground to start off with, to be fair. I've been there a couple of times.
Yeah, it was great. Funnily enough, the 7 seasons I was there, every season I either had a promotion or a relegation. And 3 seasons, we had 2 Wembley finals. So there was always something happening. There was always something happening in those 7 seasons. So it was never dull. A little bit like covering Sunderland, really.
That's perfect. You mentioned obviously the ups and downs of Carlisle. I know that myself. I've got family who are Carlisle oriented, so I know what it is like for them. And now seeing myself following Sunderland for a fair few decades now, seeing that up and down as well. So we'll come on to that, and I know Robin has got his own thoughts on this as well. Obviously, you've been through it all with us as well. Obviously, we'll start off with those back-to-back relegations. Myself and Robin at the time on those back-to-back relegations, I think that's the biggest heartache we've ever had in our lives of following the football club. And then we had the rise of almost getting straight back out of it with Jack Ross, who was a very good manager and very telling of his style of play. And then obviously we had to suffer another 3 years in League One. But that for you, getting to see that as well, that must have been a nice little roller coaster ride of how there's so many years I had in the Prem prior to that.
It's a sort of strange 8 years because there's this sort of narrative now that Sunderland are back in the Premier League, and there's almost it's almost a sort of 8 years is a lengthy time in terms of someone. Say you're a Sunderland fan, you're 10 years old, you're now and you started following Sunderland then, you'd now be 18. So that's a sort of generational thing that. But a lot of people forget, as you just mentioned it there, Sunderland were in the Premier League for 10 years before that. And they had a couple of years, when I was covering them, when they got relegated. I know I picked up in the first season, they were down, they got promotion, came straight back down again. Then Roy Keane came in, and that was the launch pad for the 10 years. So there are sort of two stories, there's two narratives almost in Sunderland over the last 20, 25 years. There's the previous Premier League years, and you can almost go back, you can almost say there's three, because then you can go back beyond that to the Peter Reid years, and those years that Sunderland finished seventh, and when they're in the Premier League that time. So there are three separate sort of chunks, if you like. Specifically talking about the 8 years, that was a roller coaster, and it was a very depressing roller coaster in lots of ways, because I think we were very, very aware in the season they came down that they were probably going to go down again. And as early as September, when they lost to Ipswich 5-2, I think me and my colleagues that night had a sort of, I think we all recognised that this team was heading for another relegation. It was a shambles. There were so many things wrong behind the scenes that we were almost certain they would go down again, which is exactly what happened. And they dropped down into League One. I don't think we expect them to spend 4 years there. We thought that the first season they would probably bounce back, not being arrogant, just that I thought that Jack Ross coming in and the way that they remodeled the squad, and the results were pretty largely good. I thought they would go back up. So it was no surprise they reached the playoffs. It's just a heartache of the playoff final then, which the manner in which that ended, and I think the criticisms that can be levelled at the tactics and so on in the second half, and Sunderland sort of stepping off the gas a bit, not taking the game by the scruff of its neck, and really going for it, because that was the big opportunity. And then, of course, once you've missed out that opportunity to go up the first time, you're sucked into that horrible mire of League One football, because it's very, very difficult, as we've seen, to get out of that division. Ipswich lately have had they struggle to get out. Leeds struggle to get out of League One. So once you've gone beyond that first season, it is actually harder to get out, if you like, of that situation. And going to the end of that 4 years, I think had they lost to Wycombe in that playoff final, it would have been catastrophic for the club. I think a fifth season in League One was potentially disastrous for the football club, just on so many levels, footballing levels, financial levels, support levels. So that Wycombe final was a real turning point for the football club.
I mean, just jumping in quickly on that, obviously the loss to Charlton, do you think the state of the club was in at the time, obviously with Charlton going up and coming straight back down the following year, that it would have been right for the club to go up, or do you think we would have come back down as well? Because I don't feel that we were in a position to obviously maintain a push and get ourselves established in the Championship like we did after we beat Wycombe.
Interesting, because I think when you talk to people about promotion to the Premier League, are you ready to go up? You're never ready to go up, whatever level you play at. I think you can, if you're in League Two, I'll take Carlisle as an example. They went up the other year through the playoffs to beat Stockport, but they weren't ready. But they would not have taken that opportunity. They'd have grasped the opportunity to go up, and I think that's true of Sunderland in League One. They would have taken the opportunity and made as good a fist of it as they possibly could, because the aim is to get back up there, much in the same way as take the opportunity to go into the Premier League now. And beyond all our wildest dreams, they've spent heavily and they look like they can try and make a real go of staying in the Premier League. But you wouldn't have stood back and said, "Oh well, look, we finished 24 points shy of the top two. We're not ready yet." this isn't the time. Let's have another season. Let's build and make sure we are ready, because you never are ready. No team is ever ready to step up. It's how you address it once you are up. And sometimes it might be by the skin of your teeth that you stay up. But if you stay up, you stay up, and then you start to rebuild. And I think if Sunderland had gone up, I think they would have stayed up. It wouldn't have been a great season, but I think they would have stayed in the Championship, because above all else, that is the level, the minimum level at which Sunderland should ever be playing at. League One, they should never go back down to League One. That should not even be on the radar. But it's not inconceivable to see Sunderland bouncing between the Premier League and the Championship still, just because of the financial chasm, if you like, between the clubs in the Premier League and the Championship. My only fear would be what we're seeing at Leicester and at Ipswich this season. Neither of them have actually, they look like they're struggling. And part of that is PSR and the way that the clubs are financially, the pressures on clubs under PSR. I was reading something yesterday, is very, very heavily tilted in favour of the top six in the Premier League because of their overall wealth, and what those top six clubs don't want is other clubs impinging on their ability to become multi-billionaire worth clubs, because that's what PSR allows them to do, but at the same time penalises other clubs in not allowing them to join that club, if you like.
Yeah, for me, that if we just use loosely, Luton, for example, Luton came, did the unthinkable for their fans, got it to the Prem, tried to somewhat make a good go of it, but then when the struggles happened, the struggles hit them hard. I know we as Sunderland fans can make the little joke saying, well, at least the back-to-back relegation's off us now. It's now more recently on Luton, but that's the problem, isn't it? It's like with, as you said, the PSR, like it goes to the top six. A team like Luton don't have the money, the stature to splash out like we have this year, 160 million and counting, because obviously there may be people coming in, but that's still that's enormous, and a club like Luton couldn't be able to do that. And I think that's why they've struggled so much. Not just the Prem, I think the Championship has got a lot stronger now that we've left as well, and they struggled that season as well, and it didn't help them. So it's a sad side of affairs when you see a club drop that quick. So
Oh, but it is sad, and I think there is the football authorities, I do think, have to address how they measure the finances, because there are clubs who would unquestionably have owners that can give them millions and millions of pounds, and they can buy as many players as they like, because there's no ceiling to how much money they've got. But PSR doesn't allow them to do that because of the way the rules are geared up. I mean, Sunderland have been very clever. They didn't spend much over the last couple of years. And so all the frugality, if you like, and the sustainability, and perhaps we've over the last few years moaned and groaned a little bit that Kirill Louis-Dreyfus wasn't spending money and they weren't buying players to make a real fist of trying to get promotion. But as it turns out, that has been a very canny move, because it's given them the headroom now to spend the 160 million plus this season in the Premier League, and they're probably right for the 3-year cycle if they stay up, because their income will be commensurate with that. Their TV income will go up. They've still spent within what they will probably make from this year's TV money and their gate receipts, and all those aspects of the club will, they will be financially better off and still would be able to live within that PSR window.
yeah, gotcha. And obviously, looking at that as a whole, obviously that's the main aim for the club this year, is to stay up, to then obviously fight for. I know there's been an interview with Speakman where he's loosely joked on saying, "Yeah, we'll go for Europe this year," and just throwing it out there and stuff like that. But you can tell deep down in Speakman's thoughts that is the possibility of stabilise the club in the Prem, and then get the extra recruitments that's needed to hit a European spot, like to start with a conference possibly, just to get your foot in the door of Europe and then push forward that way. So I think myself and Robin have alluded it to each other and on the pod several times. If the club is spent wisely, it's not going, all right, for example, say Michele, there you go, there's 50 million, just an impulse buy. It's no, we want him for 20 million. This is what we can offer him, things like that. And likewise, offering then those that deserve it a contract extension. So, like for me, the big one was my ender. My ender deserved that after his Wembley performance. It was kind of like a gift, saying, if you sign this, this is what we can offer you. For you, seeing, obviously, you've seen a host of different players, different managers. One thing I will ask is, what do you feel like how the ethos has changed from, say, yesteryear manager to obviously like what we have now with Reggie's?
Well, there's been a bit of a sea change in that respect because we've moved away from. I suppose the classic example is Paolo Di Canio and Roberto Di Fanti and bringing in 14 players and bringing in what sort of and that extended into to a degree Sam Allardyce, David Moyes, the mercenary attitude of players who were coming just for the money, who had no real allegiance to Sunderland. You know, it was a paycheck at the end of the day for them. They didn't. There was no identity for the football club. The only identity that Sunderland had over the last few years of trying to stay in the Premier League was as a team always fighting relegation, and that was their blueprint. You know, that was if anybody asked you, well, what do you see in Sunderland? It's well, they're always constantly fighting relegation. So it didn't have an identity as a football club other than one that struggled and was a struggling football club, largely with mercenary players. I mean, and you only have to look at the Jack Rodwells and Darren Gibsons and players like that, you know, with all due respect, but they epitomised everything that was wrong with the football club at the time. So inevitably, when they did go down, they were left as, you know, Simon Grayson and Chris Coleman were at pains to point out, they were suddenly left with a dressing room that was toxic because there were players in there on however many thousands a week that didn't want to be there, younger players that were trying to make their way in the game and come through, like George Honeyman. So, you know, they've moved away. That there's been an incredible shift now because, as you were talking about there, what we're looking at now is a team that talks in terms of ambition, an ambition to play in Europe, an ambition to stay up in the Premier League. Granit Xhaka, we're here to make history. The narrative, the dialogue is all completely different. It's not we're here to fight a relegation fight. We're here to stay. We're here to make a name for ourselves. We're here to put Sunderland on the map. Now it'll be difficult. We know that. There's no question. But you know the ambition is in the proof's in the pudding in terms of the club spending the money they have this year, and they haven't spent ridiculous fees on players. They've bought, I think, cleverly because in the summer when we were sort of debating which road would Sunderland go down, I think there was a perceived opinion that the market they would have to shop in is the market where you could pick up young players who've got top flight European experience, maybe a little bit of Premier League experience around the £20 million mark. Well, that's exactly what they've done. What they have done, which has surprised, I think everybody, has brought in double the numbers that we thought they might bring in. I personally thought they might bring in 5 or 6, rely on loans and then hope that the players that brought them up got involved. But they've done more than that. They brought in 12, 14 players. But they're still, as we saw on Saturday, involving Patrick Roberts. Mienda's still playing. Wilson Isidore, who came in, okay, with a view to at some point playing in the Premier League. But they've been quite clever in the profile of players that they've brought in. And I think also they clearly know what the identity of Sunderland is as a tactical team, and that is to defend, not concede goals, and counter-attack with guile and pace, because the age profile of the defenders they're bringing in is greater than the forwards and the midfield players they're bringing in. So you can see they're looking, right, we've got to get this right. We make sure we've got experience at the back, because that's what you need in the Premier League. But at the same time, we've got youth, we've got pace, we've got guile, and hopefully we've got goals in the midfield and up front with these younger players.
Just touching on that, Nick, obviously you said the club ethos has changed, which it has done. I mean, you've seen it firsthand from the toxicity of the sort of like the mercenaries, not just, as you said, Rodwell and Gibson and that, but the likes of Didier and Dong and that, which had, Djilobodji that came in, which had no intention of really playing for the club. And these players that have come in now, I mean, they must have bought into it. I mean, how good a salesman is, Kirill, Speakman, and obviously Gisolfi that's come in this summer to sell the club in this image that we're attracting these players.
Well, there've been a few conversations around that. I mean, I think they've been very astute in how they've sold the club to these players. I mean, look, to a certain extent, footballers like anybody else in any walk of life, if you're offered a 5-year contract on good money, you're not going to say no. So I think, we've got to be realistic. A number of these players have been attracted because, initially they're looking at, a good deal. They're going to be paid 50, 60,000 pounds a week. It's 5 years. It's a very, very good financial package for them. But I think also what has changed over the last couple of years is that Sunderland have been able to, and I think, that we can never underestimate just how important Sunderland Till I Die was as a documentary series, because that put Sunderland on the map across the world. And I don't think there's any player that has come in hasn't watched it. When you speak to the players and, over a season, you get to sort of, you interview them, whatever, just about all of them knew about the football club because they'd watched Sunderland Till I Die. And then there's word of mouth. Granit Xhaka won't have come on a whim. Let's not forget, Fabian Schär is playing up the road at Newcastle. It's a Swiss international colleague of his. Don't tell me they haven't had phone calls and spoken to each other and about what it's like to live here, what the Premier League's like, and so on. So those conversations take place as well. Kirill's clearly got a very good network, being based in Switzerland and having the network of contacts in France and Europe. Again, and with his family name, that comes with weight as well. So I think there's a sort of a cornucopia of a sort of smorgasbord of all these special sort of aspects, if you like, about Sunderland, which are sold to these young players. And Granit Xhaka is a good example because he's clearly been sold a project, but he believes that it's a project he believes will work. And he wouldn't have come if he didn't believe there was a chance of Sunderland staying up and him being, a big part of that story. So I think they've been very, very astute. But I do say, I think going back, I think Sunderland Till I Die was a big driver for what has been happening over this summer.
Yeah. Speaking of the likes of Xhaka, you've hit the nail on the head of what all three, myself, Robin, and Kev always allude to as well with Xhaka. What's nice is I can't recall who asked him the question about what if the worst thing happens of relegation, and the first thing he said was like, no, relegation is not in our ethos anymore. It's gone. We don't talk about it. We don't discuss it. We talk about the now and where we want to be. And I think that is what we like about the club. The club is now completely changed. Nobody's thinking about the worst case scenario. Everyone's thinking, right, game on game, what can we do? What can we achieve next? Obviously, we've brought in obviously further additional recruits, as you said, with experience. Obviously, with either if it's had former Premier League experience, like our defenders, so a couple of defenders, and then you've got the youth of like Talby. To me, when it got touted, shall we say, before it got announced, I was saying to Liza Robin, I was like, isn't that the lad from Club Brugge who scored 2 goals in the Champions League? And you're like, wait a minute, Champions League experience. You don't put Sunderland and Champions League experience in a mix. It doesn't really work. But then when you see these lads come through the door, as yourself and Roman have said, it's that passion. There must be the story behind it where these youth as well are going, I can push on, I can do something here and prove myself. And I think that is what it is with Kirill as well. I think Kirill's at least sat down with these players himself at some point when, here's the story, then bring in Regis and go, this is your manager, things like that. I think he's took ownership to do it himself.
I think the makeup of the way it works at the club is very interesting because we were watching the players arriving at Burnley on Saturday, and as always, they do have cliques, if you like, in inverted commas. I mean, it's not a good or a bad thing; it's just the way it works. The French players all came in together. The Dan Neil, Anthony Patterson, Patrick Roberts, Chris Rigg all walked in together. And then there was another group further forward, further ahead of that. So you're inevitably going to get those pockets in a club, because that's the way it works. If you're a young Frenchman, you're basically going to pally up to another Frenchman
Yeah.
in the team. But the one thing about this team is they all speak English pretty much. And Noah Siddiqui, for instance, speaks 4 languages, and his English is impeccable. So the language they're told to speak on the training ground is English. Regis has made that quite clear. But also, I thought it was quite interesting when we were having a conversation with Regis last week about the dressing room and the leadership group, and how much influence he has within the leadership group, or how much influence the leadership group has on the players. He said, it's entirely them. I don't have anything to do with it. I don't go in the dressing room. So it's very much like Tony Mowbray. The dressing room is not an area he goes into. That's their area, and it's up to those players to police it, which is where someone like Granit Xhaka is especially important. And you watch him before a game, he shakes hands with all the players, not just the Burnley players on Saturday, all the Sunderland players. He's driving it all the time. And also, Luke O'Nine's not getting a lot of game time, or won't get a lot of game time when he's fit, but he'll be very, very important in that dressing room in terms of leadership and the way the group is brought together. So it's quite the psychology. Regis Lebris is very up on psychology and talks about psychology. So he's been very sharp there. I treat them like adults. I leave that dressing room to police itself. On the training pitch, then it's a different matter. I'm in charge. If I see them getting too high, I wade in, I bring them down. If I see the levels aren't up, I wade in, we bring them up. But again, he's very important. The likes of Luciano Vulcano, Barcherini, Procky, and all those, they've all got big roles to play within that, nurturing that group as a team. And that was one of the strengths last season, that team spirit they had, which, hopefully they won't have lost this season by bringing in 14 players, because that's the danger. You think you bring in 14 new players, largely coming into a new culture, and you've got to somehow gel them. You've got to try and, you've got to mold them into a unit, which I think that, Regis Lebris is very sharp at. He's very canny when it comes to, I think you mentioned, Mayenda being rewarded with a new contract, the other players that won promotion being rewarded with new contracts. Just little things, but they're all there to sow the seed that we're looking after you. This is a special club. We're all in this together. And, you might not get much game time, but down the line, it's a long season. You will get a chance. It's up to you to take it. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating watching it. And Regis doesn't give, he doesn't give much away. And I said to someone yesterday, he gives more away after an interview with a little nod or a wink than he does from what he says, because he's read exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what's happening, and he's very, very astute.
Yeah, you've seen that firsthand. I think it's like, sort of, say yourself or somebody else asks him about incomings, and he'll try not to not say anything, and then all you see is just a small smile, and you're like,
Yep.
somebody else might be coming through the door,
Yeah.
so we'll just hold tight on that. I'm just trying to summarize everything in a whole, really, because I don't think we've got long left on the recording there. But ultimately, the main thing is we're back in the Prem. We know we're going to make a good go of this. My question for yourself really would be, where do you want to see Sunderland finish this year? Obviously, stay up. We all want that. But would you say go for it? Just see where you finish, and then build on from there? Or would you say the main focus is just to stay up at a set amount of points?
I want to see them do a Leicester and win it. No, I can't see that ever happening again, to be honest, with the way that was an exceptional year, because the Man City's, Tottenham's and everything were all in transition, and that Leicester capitalised on that. Oh, look, the key for me has always been stay up. I'm not, anything else is a bonus. I think if they did find themselves in mid-table, if they did somehow manage to push on for a European place, well, that's unbelievable. That would be absolute dream. But I think ultimately, all of us, what the key is this season, because I know we know just how difficult the Premier League is, and okay, it's a little bit, it's going through sort of rough waters these first few games because teams are sort of still trying to establish what their squads are. And I mean, look at West Ham, and I can't see that they will. If it carries on with Graham Potter in the way that it is, they'll probably change the manager there, and so on and so on. So there's all, it's not settled down yet. And you're getting sort of results which you didn't expect, Brentford beating Aston Villa and so on. So it's at the moment, nobody can really put a nail on just how difficult it potentially is going to be. So, when we did our predictions at work about the three teams going down, I found it really difficult to pick three teams because from top to bottom, every single team in the Premier League is now, aside from Burnley, Leeds, and Sunderland, all those other teams are established Premier League teams. Come what may, they may have had their problems, but as we spoke about West Ham last weekend and said, oh, well, there's a troubled team with problems, and they still finished 18 points clear of the bottom three. Wolves managed to finish fairly clear of the bottom three. So to try and suddenly break into that party, if you like, and say, well, I think there's a danger of being arrogant and saying, well, we'll be fine. We can beat Brentford, we can beat Bournemouth, we can beat Brighton. I think we've got to be a lot more measured. I think there was a bit of a meltdown after Burnley. Don't forget, Burnley spent a lot of money this summer as well. Scott Parker's a very experienced manager. He's taken Fulham up, he's taken Bournemouth up. He's brought in players like Kyle Walker, who basically didn't get out of second gear on Saturday. And so you've got, you can't just take it for granted that, those matches that you think like Brentford next weekend that you're looking at thinking, oh, we could potentially start the season with 9 points out of 9. Well, Brentford are no mugs. They might have lost 2 or 3 key players, but they brought in 2 or 3 good players, as was proved on Saturday. So it will be difficult. It will be very, very tough. But I think, the way that Granit Xhaka speaks about not thinking about relegation, about believing, self-belief, confidence, someone said yesterday, 10 or 11 wins. Well, they got 1. We need 10 more. And we don't know where they'll come. We might go to Old Trafford and pull off a win at, Man United. We might go to Tottenham and surprise them. We might, we might win at Bournemouth. We might win at Brighton. Home form is going to be key. They've got to win home games. So it's not inconceivable that they could win those 10 or 11 games, and that's the ambition.
Gotcha. Well, no, that is amazing. Thank you very much for providing that. I do appreciate you joining us today. I know you're really busy there, Nick, so thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with us.
Pleasure. No problem at all. I'm off to see Luciano Volcano now.
There we go.
His press conference debut.
Yeah, well, don't William too much.
I won't. Be soft.
And a thank you to you, Robin.
Thank you, Adam, and obviously thank you, Nick, for your time. It's been a pleasure. Let's hope that we do have that season where we do just enough, so to speak, if not more.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Indeed. And as ever, everybody else, we'll see you on the next one.